I was on a program called Semester at Sea. I was in India. I had gone through this fire, actually, after a big, long hike, and we were dying of thirst, and came down, and the first thing that there was to get to where we could drink anything was a watermelon. Cost me 5 cents. 3 weeks later, I was in Japan, and that same little watermelon was $26. Just about a year ago, I was at Washington State University, and we had received a grant from the Specialty Crop Research Initiative, and we were working with Washington State University on a cherry project. And everybody in the room, all the students that were there, were all Chinese, except for one fellow. But I was sitting with all these Chinese students, and we were talking about cherries, naturally, and we were talking about how it would be great to have cherries get $2.99 a pound here in the U.S., and that would have been a good price here. And what they were telling me is the cherries, for a pound of cherries in China, go for over $20 a pound. 30 years apart. And it was the same experience. So what I'm going to talk today is about specialty crops. And I've been going to a number of these conferences over the last few years, and we never seem to really talk about it. And so I don't think that I am probably the best expert in the world on this. I'm just coming from a perspective because of what we developed and how we thought about it when we decided to get into this space. So the first thing, I became a lawyer and got a master's of law in transnational business transactions, and the first thing I do with any contract or anything, you always define what it is that you're talking about. And so for those of you who do or don't know what specialty crops are, hey, it's fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, dried food, horticulture, nursery crops, and I'm thinking, boy, that seems like a lot of things. But why are we calling it specialty then? So another way of thinking about it, it's not the row crops that we've been talking about most of today. It's not the corn, the wheat, the soybeans, the potatoes, and that sort of thing. It is, however, when you go into the grocery store, everything that you see when you walk into the fruit and vegetable section. And it tends to be more of the fresh fruit side of things is where I'm going to focus today. That list on the left is listing common fruit and specialty crop products, both fruits and nuts. But I want to focus on the specialty tree fruits, and because that's where we focused, and that's where what I know most about. When I come to these conferences and see, we talk about the drought always comes up, and where is that happening? And the U.S. breadbasket, where is all that agriculture occurring, is happening right in the middle of the country there. And if you go back and look at where the droughts were in 1936, it was right there. And then you look at where the droughts is in 2012, and it's more or less the same area of the country. But if you go and look at where the specialty crops are grown, it's outside of that area, and often in those areas, because the specialty crops are often with permanent crops as well, they often have rather sophisticated irrigation systems that have been built into them, limiting the risk, if you will. As an investor, looking at it that way. Our family, we live up in the state of Washington, and we grow grapes for wine, and apples and cherries. I, having been, I went to high tech worked for Adobe Systems down here for a long time, and when I came back to help out of the family farm stuff, and I was looking at the books, and I could see that in 10 weeks of the year, half of our labor costs occurred in 10 weeks, and it was all during the harvest time. So that got my attention just from how are we going to run this business type of a thing. But in trying to expand out for the purposes of this discussion, what is happening with specialty crops in general? And I actually had to do a little research here for this presentation to get myself back up to speed. I know what's happening in the places we're focused, and yields have gone way up. It was about 25, what we call bins an acre, which there's about 900 pounds of fruit in a bin, so half a ton in a bin. Used to be about that in apples, for example, 25 bins per acre. Now you can get as much as 80, and that has happened in the last 20 years or so. So there's been huge progress, and that has to do with the varieties of apples that are grown. going from red delicious to Fujis and Galos and that kind of thing. But more importantly, the way that they're planted. And so they go to this high density. So instead of trees being 20 feet apart, there are these big round globes. They've shrunk down so that the row is 8 to 10 feet wide, and there's as little as 18 inches between the trees. And you're trying to create a fruiting wall. So part of the message here is specialty crops are becoming more and more like row crops. And that enables lots of things from really an area of industry that has been skipped over by technology. So almost all specialty crop is done by hand. It's hand-picked, and it's hand-transported and hand-sprayed, and that is ever so slowly changing. And part of the reason for that has been that people perceived specialty crops as all being different and relatively small in acreage, which is true. It's a lot less acreage. Specialty crops are about 13% of that total acreage. But as we're going to see here, they're pretty profitable crops. So the growth here in the U.S. the acreage has actually been shrinking over the years, but we've still been growing because the yield's been going up. If you just take and look at the analysis here from North America and what are we growing, you look at the top production in terms of metric tons and so forth, and you look at that list there, and you keep going down the list, and the first one you see is number 12, grapes. That would be a specialty crop. Everything else would be up higher. The next specialty crop down that I'm going to talk about today is apples, and that's at number 18. Okay, so that was North America. But then if you resort it and look at what it per metric ton, what are you making out of those crops? Well, golly, grapes of everything else above is the proteins, the meats, and the eggs, and so forth. Grapes is number 1, and apples is number 2. So that's a different way of looking at it. It is special. So then you look at what's happening in the world here, and I coming from the high-tech area and so forth, and saying everything I hear about in the Northwest in Seattle is the growth of China and the emerging markets and so forth, and how does that play out and with the specialty crops? So you can see most of the rest of the top 5 producers in the world in apples here have been relatively flat, and China is going off the chart here. To give you an example, in the United States we have about 300,000 acres of apples, and in China they have 5 million. There's China on the left again, and then the rest of the world in the United States is number 2, and then Turkey, which is an area that's really growing, and Italy historically has been a big apple producer. So I started looking at other specialty crops worldwide. Tangerine and mandarin production. There it is. China's way up there again, and now we have Spain, and United States is 8th or 9th. Peaches. China's way up there again. Italy, United States is number 3. Pears. China. United States is number 2. And then Brazil for orange production, and a lot of that is going to juice rather than fresh production. But in pure acreage, they're number 1 in the world. So thinking about innovation and so forth, one of my theories here: why hasn't more happened in this space in agriculture? And part of it is because, in fact, the U.S. is not one of the leaders in specialty crops, and a lot of the innovation has tended to come out of the United States, and that has gone to the row crops because that is where we are number 1, and historically have been number 1. So the opportunities as a result, because there has been little, relatively speaking, done on the technology side of things, it has occurred on the plant side of things. I was telling you about the yield, and I think the universities from Davis to Washington State University up the West Coast here have done a great job in that part of it. So I think there's this opportunity for disruptive technologies to come in and have a real major impact in the high-touch labor specialty areas. So also, the waste is actually pretty unreal that occurs. And I'll give you an example. In apple production right now, when you're picking the trees, the laborers are picking, typically the grower would ask the picker, if it looks like it's been damaged, just throw it on the ground. And why are you throwing it on the ground? It's because every bin that you put into the packing house, about 1,500 to 3,000 pieces of fruit in that bin, every piece that goes in, you have to pay $75 or $80. So if I can get the bad fruit out in the field and just throw it on the ground, that's a good thing, because I'm not paying that cost, and basically it's got to be taken out later anyway. We looked at this thing and built this, which is the PickerTech mobile harvest system, we call it. And there's an example here that you still use the pickers. But one of the things that we observed is the pickers aren't picking most of the time. There's a labor shortage. The immigration issues are huge. All this is happening in the world. And there's an opportunity here to dramatically improve the productivity, because if you can just allow the pickers to pick, you can double your productivity. If they're only using 50% of their time, and where's that time going? They're walking down the road to dump their bag. They're carrying 70 pounds of fruit all day, so they get tired during the course of the day. They have to go up and down the ladders. They have to move the ladders. They have to look at the fruit to decide whether it's going to go in the bag or on the ground. All these actions in the time studies that we did took 30 to 70% of their time. So the idea was create a system that allows them total flexibility, a bottomless bag, if you will. And I'm going to show you what we did, and this is just one thing. There's the problem right now, I'll just tell you, for the specialty crop industry, is that the investor community isn't looking at that opportunity enough, and that's basically why I'm here. And so those companies that would like to really focus on this space struggle to get the funding for it, because it's going to traditionally the row crops. But if I could ask, can you do that video back there? I'm just going to show you quickly what we did on this transport tube technology. We were able to patent it and get a very broad patent around this. It allows us to move, on the back of your magazine, you'll see fish flying through the air and so forth, and it allows us to move things very gently and very quickly. And that's an apple. And the real problem and why things haven't mechanized in the past is that if you bruise something, then you can't sell it as a fresh product. And so we allow things to move very quickly and very rapidly without touching the sides of a tube, and then decelerate it. And in fact, what we do on that harvester that you saw is in the field, we scan it and we separate the good fruit for the fresh product market from the industry fruit right there in the field and put it in two different bins. So it never makes it to the packing house if it's a bad fruit. It goes right off to the applesauce maker or whatever. So this technology here is what we always talked about as Adobe. We always wanted to create a platform technology. I live in the Northwest. Microsoft had the platform technology with the operating system. We think we've got a platform technology here that we can take in and license and or create products and sell into a number of the specialty crops. So that tube conforms to the shape of the object, and so it doesn't matter what shape the object is that you put in there, we'll move it. That brought us to fish. That was still part of the ag. I'll just mention that real quickly. Again, in the Northwest, dams are a big issue on the Columbia River and so forth, and I said, well, gosh, I wonder if we could put a salmon through here. The answer was yes. We had to change the tube a bit, and so part of what we're doing as well is moving salmon, and that allows us to get into the aquaculture industry, because if you stress the fish before they're killed, the quality of the meat goes down, and so you don't want to do that, and the fish move so quickly and fast through there that before they put out the chemical and enzyme to go into rigor mortis when they're killed, they're through the tube. And the last thing is to get the fish over the dams so that they don't have to spill the water down the river as much, and so you have, as a grower, watering your fields. So that is what we're doing, but we've just focused on one area that I'm telling you, there are so many spaces in the specialty crop area, and it's just it is truly ripe for innovation. Thank you.